Tony Chu is cibopathic. That means he can take a bite of an apple and get a feeling in his head about what tree it grew from, what pesticides were used on the crop, and when it was harvested. Or he could eat a hamburger and flash onto something else entirely. Today we're taking a look at Chu, Volume 1, Taster's Choice. And this is a wild one, so buckle up and check it out. Hello all, my name is Dominic and you are watching The Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today we're jumping into an indie series I've been wanting to read for quite some time, and that is Chu. But before we continue, here are some quick facts about today's collection. Chu was written by John Layman and penciled by Rob Guillory. The issues collected in this volume were first published by Image Comics in 2009. This first trade paperback collection includes Chu issues 1 through 5 and comes in at 128 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the collection in its entirety as well as commenting on plot points. You've been warned. Okay, and here's the first look at the collection today. As I mentioned, this is Volume 1, Taster's Choice. We get a great look at our protagonist Tony Chu there on the front. As far as this trade paperback goes in general, it is a standard size, glossy print paged trade paperback. All pretty standard from Image, but very well made, no complaints here. And I actually picked up this volume secondhand at a used bookstore in my region. It got a great price, a little over $5, and I was so eager to check out this volume finally. And you can imagine my surprise when I opened it up and saw that it was signed by the creators. And while I don't have any kind of certificate of authenticity, I looked up their signatures and these do look awfully like them. So in my mind, I might have just scored on a signed copy of this edition. But who can say for sure? At any rate, I got these first few issues at a great price, and I was so excited to check out the series that I've heard about for some time. And as we get ready to dive into the collection itself here, let me talk about what I did hear about Chu. I heard it was an independent series that had great, stylish-looking art and followed a guy who had some kind of food-related supernatural ability or sense which he used to solve crimes, or something. And while what I heard was true, I'd never heard how dark and arguably twisted this series could be. And honestly, I was fascinated to find that out when I first read the couple issues here in this volume. Because yes, Tony Chu is something in this universe called Cibopathic, which means that he can take a bite of a food and flash on everything around that food. Like I mentioned in the intro, if he takes a bite of a fruit, he'll get a picture of where that tree was, where it came from, what pesticides were used on it, the area it was grown, things like that. If he eats a burger, he might flash on this animal's life, who butchered it, how that felt, what happened. He gets all of these details that are so overwhelming that eating for him is kind of a chore that he hates. He's almost haunted by it. The only food that doesn't affect this, for whatever reason, is beets, which is a large portion of his diet. And when we start this series, we find out that Tony is a cop, and he's a quirky guy, but he's fairly decent at being a cop. We also find out that they live in a kind of dystopia where the fear of the avian flu virus has led to the universal outlawing of chicken. In this world, there's also chicken substitutes that may or may not be outlawed as well, and we have kind of a worldwide prohibition-feeling era around chicken. In this world as well, there's a lot of arguments on whether or not this is all some bigger conspiracy. And that's the world of Chu, which I found fascinating, as I had no idea that this was a kind of weirdly dystopian world. And as for those dark elements I mentioned, in one of the first issues, when Chu and his partner inadvertently end up in the path of a serial killer, which happens after Chu inadvertently flashes on some of the serial killer's cooking, exposing the killer. We have a very violent scene where his partner is almost murdered, and Chew is forced to confront this serial killer in a dark alley, demanding that he tell him all the names of his victims to finally give that family peace. When the serial killer fails to do so and decides to slit his own throat and take his life, Chew resorts to a kind of cannibalism, or at least taking one bite out of this vicious serial killer so that he can gain the knowledge of all of his victims. I did not expect this series to go on those kind of dark turns, but that event kicks off the premise of the series when Chew is reprimanded and essentially kicked off of the police department only to be recruited by the FDA, which in this world is like the super policing force of the world. This agency essentially knows he's such an asset because of his cibopathy, and he begins doing missions and assignments for them around the world. And that's really the setup of Chew. But at the heart of it, there's also a lot of deeper conspiracies. What is truth? What is happening? Who's arranging everything? And there's just a lot of twists and turns and a surprising amount of heart in this volume. The issues themselves feel very self-contained or episodic, where you feel like you get to have a full story in each of these issues, while there's kind of an overarching narrative of the deeper conspiracy within this dystopia. And I've mentioned it before, but I love comics sometimes where they almost have self-contained issues with an overarching narrative like this, because I feel when you buy a trade collection, you almost feel like you have 5 individual stories that are connected rather than one, and I feel like you almost get more bang for your buck. It almost calls back to kind of the Silver Age of comics and beyond, when you kind of had these self-contained adventures. It's just done so well, and it is a surprising series that really hooked me in from moment one. In all of this, I haven't even really delved into the art, which stylistically is just beautiful. It's kind of grotesque, but also wonderfully cartoony. It transports me to this world that feels both surreal and believable at the same time. The character models are so expressive that they just win me over on every page. And the attention to detailing in all the backgrounds and sets really makes this world of Chew feel so immersive and lived in. The graphic nature of this collection may mean that it's not for everyone, especially with some of the darkness and violence of the crimes, but if you understand what this series is selling, it might be worth buying for those interested like me. This was intriguing and just a little bit twisted, but I was pretty happy reading this first collection of Chew. And now that we've reached the end, I think it's about that time that I give this collection a grade. For its immersive world building, wonderfully stylish art style, and the feel of a quirky cop procedural drama, The Comic Book Report has to give Chew, Volume 1, Taster's Choice, a B. It is safe to say that Chew is unlike anything I have ever read. A perfect balance of sickening and sweet with immensely creative ideas. This book leaves me wanting more while savoring what I've just consumed. I particularly enjoyed this very unique choice for dystopia, a quirky Prohibition-era world with deep underlying conspiracies that leave you asking, who can you trust? There is a whole lot going on, but this was a great first entry. I would recommend this to friends who want something that's not a traditional superhero fare in comic books, that are open to something that's a bit more dark or edgy. They could do a lot worse than Chew, Volume 1, Taster's Choice. And that's going to do it today for the Comic Book Report. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and until next time, have a good one.